I am Maya, 35 years old, and I spent a decade building my husband into the king he thought he was. At his parents' 40th anniversary dinner in the most exclusive restaurant in Atlanta, I caught him texting his mistress under the table. When I pulled him into the hallway to avoid a scene, he adjusted his custom-tailored suit, smirked at me, and said, "Let us be real, Maya. You are nothing more than a co-parent to me now. Chloe is my real match, my intellectual and social equal." I did not cry or scream. I simply smiled, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "Understood. A co-parent is exactly what I will be." He had no idea that by dessert, I would begin dismantling his entire fake empire. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to quietly destroy a man who underestimated your worth. Growing up, my father always taught me to move in silence. He built his commercial construction business from the ground up and left me a legacy of hard work and quiet wealth. I carried that lesson into my marriage with Terrence. At 37, Terrence was a regional vice president of sales, a title that sounded incredibly impressive until you realized his lifestyle cost 3 times what his salary actually brought in. We were sitting in the private dining room of a high-end steakhouse, surrounded by the smell of roasted prime rib, heavy, expensive cologne, and pure arrogance. Terrence was holding court at the head of the table, acting like he was the one footing the massive bill for his parents' anniversary. He leaned back in his leather chair, swirling a glass of $200 bourbon, holding his older sister Jasmine and her white husband Lucas, completely captivated with an exaggerated story about his latest business triumph. I sat quietly to his right, playing the role I had perfected over the last 10 years. I was the supportive, quiet wife who handled the background logistics while he took the spotlight. Terrence thought he was being slick. He had his phone resting on his thigh under the crisp white tablecloth, his thumb moving rapidly. He would smile at his mother, laugh at Lucas and his terrible jokes, and then cast his eyes down to the glowing screen. I did not have to guess who he was texting. I already knew about Chloe. I had known for 3 long months. Chloe was 28, a lifestyle influencer who spent her days posting aesthetic vlogs about finding a high-value provider. She was young, she was loud, and she loved spending money. Terrence's money, which in reality meant my money. I watched him tap out a long message, a smirk playing on his lips. My heart did not break. It just turned to ice. I placed my linen napkin on the table and leaned over, whispering in his ear that we needed to talk outside right now. Terrence rolled his eyes, letting out a heavy sigh like I was a nagging mother interrupting his playtime. He excused himself to the table, charmingly claiming I probably needed his help, deciding what to order for our 12-year-old son Malik and our 9-year-old daughter Tiana back home. In the dimly lit hallway outside the private room, the charm immediately dropped from his face. He crossed his arms, stretching the fabric of the bespoke suit I had bought him for his birthday. "What is it, Maya?" he snapped. "You are ruining the vibe in there. You are texting Chloe," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level, "at your parents' anniversary dinner. You could not even give it a rest for 2 hours to celebrate your own mother and father." I expected him to deny it. I expected him to stutter or lie or apologize to keep the peace like he usually did when caught in a minor lie. Instead, Terrence just stared at me. He adjusted his cuffs, admiring his own reflection in the gold-framed mirror on the wall. Then he let out a short, cruel laugh. "Let us be real, Maya," he said, his voice dripping with absolute condescension. "We have been running on fumes for years. You are nothing more than a co-parent at this point. You manage the house, you manage Malik and Tiana, and you are good at it. But Chloe..." He smiled as he said her name. "Chloe is my real match. She is my intellectual and social equal. She actually understands the pressure of being a man of my caliber." The sheer audacity of his words hung in the quiet hallway. Intellectual and social equal. A lifestyle influencer who did not know the difference between a retirement account and a basic checking account. A man of his caliber. A man who still asked me to balance his spreadsheets at the end of every month because math was not his strong suit. I looked at the man I had given my 20s to, the father of my incredibly smart and observant children. Any remaining shred of love or loyalty I had for him evaporated in that dim hallway, leaving behind a terrifying absolute clarity. I did not shed a single tear. I did not raise my voice or cause a scene. I looked at his arrogant, handsome face and smiled. Understood, I said, my voice soft but deadly steady. A co-parent is all I will be, Terrence. I turned around and walked right back into the dining room, leaving him standing in the hallway, looking mildly confused by my lack of hysterics. When I took my seat next to his empty chair, Jasmine leaned across the table. Her perfectly laid closure framed a face that constantly looked down on me. "Is Terrence okay?" she asked, her tone sharp. "You always stress him out with household drama, Maya. Let the man enjoy his parents' night." Lucas, her mid-level bank manager husband, chimed in, swirling his wine. "You have to understand, Maya, Terrence is carrying a lot of weight as the king of this family. You just have to support him. That is your role." I picked up my water glass, taking a slow sip. The king of the family. The phrase was almost comedic. Terrence's family had always treated me like the worker bee, the reliable but boring foundation that allowed their precious golden boy to shine. Jasmine constantly expected me to cater her family events for free, but treated me like a hired vendor when I arrived. They thought Terrence was a self-made millionaire. They had absolutely no idea that I owned a high-end luxury event planning agency that pulled in 7 figures a year. They did not know about my late father's inheritance, which I had used to quietly establish the holding companies that currently owned the roof over their heads. As Terrence strutted back into the room, flashing his winning smile at the waiter, I looked at the keys to his brand new Mercedes sitting on the table. Just last year, Terrence had come to me sweating and panicked because he had secretly racked up $40,000 in credit card debt trying to impress his colleagues. I had paid it off in full without a single word of reproach just so his credit score would not tank. I had funded the massive down payment for that very car he was currently bragging to Lucas about. I had bought the suit he was wearing. I was the bank, the safety net, the ultimate fixer. And he had just looked me in the eye and told me I was nothing but a co-parent. Terrence sat down, picking up his bourbon and winking at whatever new text Chloe had sent to his screen. He thought he had put me in my place. He thought I was just going to swallow the disrespect to keep my family together like African American women are so often expected to do. He thought my quietness was submission. He was terribly wrong. I reached into my designer clutch and pulled out my phone. I opened my messages and found Kendra, my best friend and the most ruthless divorce attorney in the state. She had been waiting for my signal for weeks while we quietly moved my assets to safety. I typed out a single short message. "It is time, freeze the shadow accounts." I hit send, put my phone away, and smiled brightly at my mother-in-law as the main courses arrived. Terrence wanted a co-parent. He was about to find out exactly what happens when the worker bee decides to stop making honey for the false king. The morning sunlight hit the hardwood floors of our bedroom, but for the first time in a decade, I did not immediately roll out of bed to orchestrate Terrence's life. Usually my alarm would go off at 5 sharp. I would quietly slip downstairs to grind his imported Guatemalan coffee beans, ensuring the water temperature was exactly right so it would not burn the roast. I would march into his massive walk-in closet, select a bespoke suit match the silk tie, and meticulously press the collar of his shirt because the luxury dry cleaner never got it crisp enough for his liking. I would pack his leather overnight bag for whatever regional sales conference he had that week, perfectly rolling his belts and tucking away his expensive cologne. I managed his entire world so he could walk out the front door looking like a king. Today I stayed in bed until 6. When I finally went downstairs, I made oatmeal and fresh fruit for Malik and Tiana. I packed 2 healthy school lunches, adding little handwritten notes to their bags like I always did. I brewed a simple cup of green tea for myself. I left the expensive espresso machine cold and dark on the counter. Sitting at the kitchen island, I pulled out my phone. Kendra had given me very specific legal instructions the night before. I downloaded a court-approved CO parenting app, the exact kind designed specifically for high-conflict divorces. I set up a comprehensive profile, meticulously inputting Malik's soccer schedule, Tiana's ballet recitals, parent-teacher conferences, and upcoming medical appointments. I generated the automated invitation link and sent it directly to Terrence's personal email address. Then I opened my phone contacts. I scrolled down to my husband's name. The man I had loved, the man I had built from the ground up, the man who had looked me in the eye just 12 hours ago and told me I was nothing but a placeholder. I tapped the screen and hit block caller. I went to my social media accounts and did the same on every single platform. A 10-year habit of constant communication, of being his personal secretary, his therapist, and his punching bag, was severed in a single second. My chest did not tighten. My hands did not shake. I felt lighter than air. I heard his heavy footsteps on the wooden stairs around 7:30. Terrence stomped into the kitchen, adjusting the cuffs of a wrinkled white dress shirt he had clearly pulled from the dark back corner of the closet. He looked around the pristine kitchen, his brow furrowed in deep confusion. There was no steaming coffee mug waiting on the island. There was no hot breakfast sizzling on the stove. There was no packed leather weekender bag sitting by the front door. Malik and Tiana were at the table eating their oatmeal, happily chatting about a middle school science project. Terrence looked at me, a mixture of annoyance and disbelief flashing across his handsome face. He checked his heavy gold watch, the exact watch I had bought him for our 5th anniversary. "What is going on, Maya?" he demanded, his voice thick with morning irritation. My alarm did not go off. "You know I have that massive regional sales conference in Dallas today. Where is my overnight bag? Where is my boarding pass? Why is there no coffee?" I took a slow sip of my green tea, looking at him with absolute calm. "I did not set your alarm, Terrence. I did not pack your bag. I am sure a man of your high caliber can manage his own basic travel itinerary." He let out a harsh, condescending laugh. He actually thought this was a game. He assumed I was throwing a petty domestic tantrum because of the conversation we had in the restaurant hallway last night. He leaned against the cool marble counter, shaking his head side to side. "Come on, Maya, stop playing games. I do not have time for this attitude this morning. Chloe might be my escape, but you are my wife. Do your job so I can go do mine." The absolute arrogance of his words washed over me, but it could not penetrate the solid armor I had built overnight. I stood up, rinsed my ceramic mug in the sink, and picked up my car keys. "I am not playing games, Terrence. I am simply fulfilling my new role. You explicitly said I am a co-parent. Co-parents do not pack bags. They do not brew artisanal coffee. They do not print boarding passes for grown men. Perhaps you should call Chloe. She is your intellectual equal, after all. I am sure she would love to steam your shirts." I turned to my children, my voice completely transforming to warm and steady. "Grab your backpacks, kids. It is time for school." I walked out the front door with Malik and Tiana, leaving Terrence standing completely frozen in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the empty espresso machine. I dropped the kids off at their private school and drove straight to my agency. Walking through the heavy double-glass doors of my office felt like stepping into my true kingdom. The reception area was a masterclass in modern luxury, filled with fresh white orchids and plush emerald velvet seating. My team was already buzzing with intense activity, coordinating a $1 million charity gala for next weekend. My lead designer approached me with premium fabric swatches. My operations manager handed me a profit report showing a record-breaking quarter, and my office phone rang with calls from high-net-worth clients who trusted my creative vision implicitly. Here I was not a worker bee. Here I was the visionary. I was the powerhouse holding an entire lucrative operation together. Terrence truly thought my business was just a cute little party planning hobby to keep me busy while he conquered the corporate sales world. He had absolutely no idea that the agency he dismissed so casually was out-earning his regional vice president's salary by an embarrassing margin. I poured myself into my work, signing massive corporate event contracts and approving towering floral arrangements, letting the steady rhythm of my own success wash away any lingering toxicity from the man I left standing helpless in our kitchen. The first real consequence of my new boundaries hit him around 10:30 in the morning. I was in the middle of a critical vendor meeting when I checked my tablet. Terrence had finally realized the sheer gravity of his situation. Without me to organize his complex travel schedule, he had completely forgotten that his flight to Dallas departed at 9:45, not 11. He had no packed clothes, no arranged car service to the airport, and no printed itinerary to reference. He had missed his flight, entirely blowing his attendance at the most critical regional sales conference of his fiscal year. I knew exactly what he was doing in that very moment. He was probably pacing the airport terminal, red-faced and sweating furiously, trying to call my personal phone to scream at me. I could picture him watching his colleagues board the plane while he argued with the gate agent. He was undoubtedly trying to blame me for his massive failure, demanding that I use my connections to fix his mistake and book him a new flight out of my own pocket. But my phone remained completely silent in my purse. The digital block held strong, keeping his toxic rage far away from my peace. Eventually desperate and completely unable to reach me anywhere else, he was forced to check his personal email. He found the automated invitation to the CO parenting application. He had to download the software, create a secure password, and verify his identity just to speak to the woman who used to manage his entire existence. A bright notification popped up on my tablet screen. It was a direct message from Terrence through the legal portal. The text was completely unhinged, practically vibrating with panic and rage. "You ruined my week, Maya. I missed my flight. My regional director is absolutely furious with me because I am missing the opening keynote. You think this is funny, locking me out of my own life? You better call me right now and fix this." I read his frantic, angry words without a single ounce of empathy. I did not feel pity for him. I did not feel the familiar urge to soothe his fragile ego or apologize for his own blatant incompetence. I placed my fingers on the keyboard and typed a response that would forever become part of the official court record. My reply was ice cold, perfectly professional, and entirely focused on my only remaining legal obligation to him. "Terrence, please note that it is your scheduled day to pick up Malik from soccer practice at 5:30 this evening. Tiana has a routine dentist appointment tomorrow at 4 in the afternoon. Please confirm you have added these events to your personal calendar. Regards, Maya." I hit send, locked the tablet screen, and went right back to building my empire. When Terrence finally returned to the house that evening, he did not come to apologize. He came to make a statement. I was sitting in the living room reviewing floral arrangements for a corporate gala on my tablet when he slammed the front door. He marched straight upstairs without looking at me, and I heard the aggressive sound of hangers scraping against the closet rod. He was packing. I did not follow him. I did not ask him to stay. I just continued swiping through images of cascading white hydrangeas. 45 minutes later, he dragged 3 heavy leather suitcases down the sweeping oak staircase. He dropped them in the foyer, panting slightly from the exertion. He stood there waiting for a reaction, waiting for the tears and the begging that he was so accustomed to receiving from the women he manipulated. When I simply looked up from my screen with a calm raised eyebrow, his jaw tightened. "I am leaving, Maya," he announced, his voice booming through the foyer, trying to project an authority he no longer possessed. "You want to act like a cold, unfeeling co-parent, then you can sleep in this big house all by yourself. I am not going to stay where I am not respected. I am moving downtown. I have already secured a luxury high-rise apartment. Chloe and I are starting our lives together, a life where I am actually appreciated." I nodded slowly, setting my tablet on the coffee table. "Have a safe drive, Terrence. Drive carefully," he sneered, grabbing his bags and storming out to the Mercedes, the car I secretly paid for. The heavy front door clicked shut, and the house fell into a beautiful, profound silence. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water and went back to work. By the next afternoon, Terrence was making sure the entire world knew about his grand exit. I was at the agency finalizing a lighting setup when my assistant handed me my coffee and mentioned that Terrence had updated his social media. I opened the app to see a professionally filtered photograph of the downtown Atlanta skyline, taken from a floor-to-ceiling window of a penthouse apartment. In the corner of the frame, you could see Chloe's manicured hand holding a glass of champagne resting casually against his. The caption read, "Leveling up, leaving the dead weight behind and stepping into my true purpose with my real match." He wanted me to see it. He wanted me to feel insecure, to question my worth, to wonder if he was truly living a better life without me. He thought the high-rise apartment, the champagne, and the 28-year-old influencer made him a winner. He honestly believed he had defeated me. I looked at the picture and felt absolutely nothing but a deep sense of relief. He had willingly removed himself from my sanctuary. The illusion of his victory was the perfect distraction while I dismantled his reality. My peace was briefly interrupted an hour later by a notification on my personal phone. It was a text message from Jasmine Terrence's older sister. Jasmine had always viewed herself as the matriarch of their family, constantly inserting herself into our marriage and expecting me to fund her lifestyle while looking down her nose at me. She had clearly spoken to Terrence and heard his highly edited version of events. Her message was a masterclass in entitlement and delusion. Maya, I cannot believe you drove my brother away. She wrote her words radiating through the screen. Terrence is a good man, a king who provides for you and those children. You have been entirely too focused on your little party planning hobby lately, and you completely neglected your duties as a wife. A man of his caliber needs a peaceful home, not a stubborn woman trying to prove a point. You need to swallow your pride, call him right now, apologize and beg him to come back to his family before Chloe permanently takes your spot. You are tearing this family apart over your own selfish ego. I read the message twice, marveling at the sheer audacity. My little party planning hobby. The same hobby that paid for the 5-star catering at her backyard barbecue last summer. The same hobby that covered the down payment on her white husband Lucas's struggling bank franchise. Jasmine lived in a world where Terrence was the wealthy provider, and I was just the lucky woman allowed to ride his coattails. She was terrified that without Terrence in the house, her access to my hidden bank account would disappear. But instead of realizing she should be polite to the actual breadwinner, she doubled down on her brother's manufactured dominance. I did not type a furious paragraph defending my honor. I did not list all the financial bailouts I had provided her over the last decade. I did not point out that her brother was a serial cheater who had just abandoned his children for an internet personality. Responding would give her power. It would show her that her words affected me. Instead, I simply deleted the message and blocked her number. Just like that, another toxic thread tying me to Terrence's family was permanently severed. I took a deep breath, the air in my office feeling cleaner, purer. I was not the scapegoat anymore. At 2 in the afternoon, I left my agency and drove to the financial district to meet with Kendra. Her law firm occupied the top floor of a sleek glass building, a fitting fortress for a woman who specialized in destroying arrogant men in divorce court. Kendra was waiting for me in her expansive corner office, wearing a sharp crimson suit, her hair pulled back into a flawless bun. She had a stack of thick legal files spread across her massive mahogany desk. When I walked in, she looked up and smiled a dangerous, predatory smile that meant we were ready to go to war. "Have a seat," Maya Kendra said, gesturing to the leather chair opposite her. "I have reviewed everything. The shadow accounts are frozen, the personal accounts are separated, and the legal firewall around your assets is completely secure. We are ready to finalize the asset separation." I sat down, crossing my legs and smoothing my skirt. "How bad is his delusion, Kendra?" Kendra let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head as she opened the first file. "It is honestly spectacular. He thinks he is a millionaire, Maya. Terrence genuinely believes his regional vice president salary is funding this entire lifestyle. He makes $180,000 a year. That is a decent salary for a normal family. But it does not cover a $1.2 million mortgage, a country club membership, private school tuitions for 2 children, luxury vacations, a new Mercedes, and a downtown high-rise apartment for his mistress." She handed me a thick, bound document. The title on the front read, "Golden Horizon Holdings, LLC." This was my secret weapon, the armor I had built years ago. When my father passed away, he left me a substantial inheritance built from decades of commercial construction. He had always warned me to protect myself, to ensure I never relied entirely on a man for my survival. I took his money and combined it with the explosive revenue from my luxury event planning agency. I created Golden Horizon Holdings, a primary LLC that I owned 100% outright. Terrence never understood business structures. He saw the money flowing and assumed his paycheck was carrying the weight. He never realized that his salary went directly into his personal checking account, which he drained every month on custom suits, expensive watches, and lavish dinners to impress his sales buddies. Every single major asset we had was owned and funded by Golden Horizon Holdings. The sprawling estate we lived in was purchased through the LLC. The cars were leased through the LLC. The country club dues were paid by the corporate account. I had literally been subsidizing his entire existence, his entire identity as a wealthy king for over a decade. He just signed a lease for a penthouse downtown, I told Kendra, leaning forward. He must have used his own credit. Kendra nodded, flipping to another page. He did, and they ran his credit based on his stated income and his current debt-to-income ratio. Because he is no longer an authorized user on your corporate cards, his available credit just plummeted. He probably put down a massive deposit using whatever he had left in his personal savings to secure that high rise. He is burning cash at an astronomical rate to impress this Chloe girl. So what is the next step? I asked, feeling the cool weight of the power I held in my hands. We let him drown, Kendra said, her eyes locking onto mine. We do absolutely nothing. We file the standard separation papers. We do not ask for spousal support because you do not need it. We demand child support according to his stated income. Right now, he is riding high on the illusion of victory. He thinks he left you behind. But the moment the next mortgage payment is due, the moment the country club renewals hit, the moment the car lease needs to be updated, he is going to realize that he has absolutely no access to the funds. He is going to try to use the cards and they are going to decline. Kendra closed the file, folding her hands on the desk. Let him think that Maya. Let him show off the view from his rented apartment. Let Jasmine send angry text messages defending his honor. The higher they climb on that pedestal of arrogance, the harder the concrete is going to feel when gravity finally kicks in. Your only job right now is to protect Malik and Tiana and continue running your business. The financial freefall is coming, and Terrence has completely cut his own parachute. I left Kendra's office feeling an overwhelming sense of calm. The sky outside was a brilliant clear blue and the city hummed with energy. I was not a discarded wife crying over a broken marriage. I was a mastermind executing a flawless strategic withdrawal. Terrence wanted a co-parent. He wanted to level up with his real match. I was going to give him exactly what he asked for. I got into my car, checked my schedule for the afternoon, and drove back to the agency. The king had left the castle completely unaware that the queen owned the land, the bricks, and the very air he was breathing. The real game had just begun. Saturday morning arrived with a gentle breeze, and the sweet realization that my weekend belonged entirely to me. For the first time in a decade, I woke up without a knot of anxiety in my chest. I did not have to coordinate an outfit for Terrence. I did not have to review a guest list to ensure his fragile ego was protected. I simply woke up, stretched in my king-sized bed, and listened to the quiet hum of my beautiful home. The children were spending the morning at a specialized coding camp they loved, which meant I had the entire day to focus on my business and my peace. But more importantly, today was the day of Jasmine and Lucas's highly anticipated annual family barbecue. Jasmine lived in a standard suburban split-level house a few miles away. Every year she hosted this gathering to welcome the spring season. She proudly called it the Royal Family Cookout. She invited aunts, uncles, cousins, and Terrence's corporate colleagues. Jasmine loved playing the role of the ultimate hostess, accepting compliments on the incredible food and the flawless presentation. But the reality behind that flawless presentation was a closely guarded secret. Jasmine could not cook, and Lucas, her white husband, was notoriously cheap. Every single year for the past 6 years, I had been the invisible benefactor behind the royal family cookout. Days before the event, I would quietly call a premium artisanal smokehouse in the city. I would pull out my corporate card and drop $500 on slow-smoked brisket, gourmet truffle macaroni and cheese, organic grilled seasonal vegetables, and custom dessert platters. I would have it delivered discreetly to Jasmine's back door 2 hours before the guests arrived. I did this to keep the peace. I did this so Terrence would not be embarrassed by his sister serving budget food to his colleagues. I subsidized their entire social standing so Terrence could maintain his illusion of grandeur. Today, however, my corporate card remained securely inside my designer wallet. I did not make a single phone call to the smokehouse. I did not arrange for a delivery. I completely washed my hands of the event. Instead of dealing with Terrence's entitled family, I drove to a botanical garden on the north side of the city. My agency was producing a massive charity gala there next month, and I needed to do a final site walkthrough. I walked through the lush green pathways, taking notes on my tablet, directing my vendors on where to place the crystal chandeliers and the hanging floral installations. The air smelled of blooming jasmine and fresh earth. I was completely in my element, functioning as the visionary powerhouse I truly was. I was wearing a casual but impeccably tailored linen jumpsuit, feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin. I was not a supporting character in someone else's fake royal family. I was the architect of my own empire. Around 1 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it at first, finishing a conversation with my lighting director. When I finally pulled the device out, I saw a flurry of text messages from Keisha. Keisha was Terrence's younger cousin and the only person in his family who consistently saw through the nonsense. She was sharp, observant, and totally unfiltered. Maya. Where are you? Keisha wrote. The text was followed by a photograph that made me stop dead in my tracks and burst out laughing. The picture showed Jasmine and Lucas's backyard. The luxurious spread of premium brisket and gourmet sides was entirely absent. In its place was a folding table covered with a cheap plastic tablecloth. Sitting on top were 3 bags of generic hot dog buns, a massive economy-sized bottle of ketchup, and a single foil pan of burnt, unevenly cooked hot dogs. Another photo came through showing Lucas standing over a smoking charcoal grill, looking panicked and sweating profusely through his polo shirt. It is a complete disaster, Keisha's next message read. People are hungry and angry. Uncle David just asked if this was a joke. Terrence showed up an hour ago with his new girl Chloe, expecting a feast to show off to her. Chloe is wearing 4-inch heels on the grass, looking like she wants to cry because a stray dog just stole a hot dog right off the table. Jasmine is hiding in the kitchen, blaming the catering company. Did you finally cut them off? I smiled, tapping my manicured nails against my phone screen. I typed back a very brief response. I am just a co-parent, Keisha. Co-parents do not buy the brisket. Enjoy the hot dogs. At exactly 3:45 in the afternoon, I sat in my parked car and turned the sound back on my phone. Almost instantly, the screen lit up with an incoming call. It was not Terrence. Terrence was too cowardly to call me directly after I had blocked him. It was Lucas, Jasmine's mid-level bank manager husband, the man who constantly tried to explain basic concepts to me, despite the fact that my agency's tax burden was larger than his entire annual salary. I let it ring 3 times before sliding my finger across the screen to accept the call. Maya. Lucas barked, his voice tight with frustration and completely lacking any basic greeting. What exactly is going on here? We have 30 people in my backyard, and the food never arrived. Jasmine is in tears. She said you always handle the catering logistics. I had to run to the discount grocery store and buy hot dogs. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is for Terrence? Chloe is sitting in my living room refusing to eat. I adjusted the air conditioning in my luxury car, taking a slow, calming breath. I did not raise my voice. I did not sound defensive. Hello, Lucas, I said pleasantly. I am having a wonderful Saturday. Thank you for asking. Do not give me that tone, Maya. Lucas fired back, slipping instantly into the condescending, authoritative voice he probably used on his bank tellers. I am trying to fix a major problem here. We expected the smokehouse delivery at noon. When Jasmine called them, they said no order was ever placed under your account. You dropped the ball on this completely. We needed that food. Terrence is furious. He is furious, I repeated, allowing a hint of amusement to seep into my voice. Yes, Lucas said, completely missing the sarcasm. Look, Maya, I know you and Terrence are going through a rough patch right now. I know you are emotional about him moving into that nice high-rise downtown. But you need to separate your personal feelings from your family obligations. Terrence is carrying a lot of weight right now. He is the head of this family. You need to be the bigger person, drop the attitude, and support the family. Trying to sabotage Jasmine's barbecue out of spite makes you look petty. Lucas, I said, cutting through his rambling lecture with a voice as cold and sharp as cracked glass. Let us get a few things perfectly clear. I do not have a rough patch with Terrence. I have a divorce attorney. I am not emotional about his new apartment because he is paying for it with credit cards he can barely afford. And most importantly, I have absolutely no family obligations to you or your wife. Maya listened to me. Lucas tried to interrupt, but I spoke right over him, refusing to yield a single inch of ground. No, Lucas, you listen to me. For 6 years, I secretly funded your wife's social events so you both would not look incompetent. I paid for the brisket. I paid for the truffles. I paid for the presentation. I subsidized your lifestyle to protect Terrence's fragile ego. But Terrence made it very clear to me the other night that I am nothing more than a co-parent. I paused, letting the weight of the new reality settle over the phone line. I could hear the faint sound of relatives arguing in the background on his end. I am just a co-parent, Lucas. I continued, my tone devoid of any emotion or empathy. Co-parents coordinate soccer schedules and dental appointments. Co-parents do not subsidize backyard barbecues for their ex-husband's extended family. Co-parents do not cater events where the mistress is a guest of honor. You want a luxury spread for your party. Pull out your own wallet and pay for it yourself. But Maya, Terrence said you would handle it. Lucas stammered, his confident middle manager tone completely evaporating as the truth finally hit him. He said you always take care of the details. Terrence is going to learn very quickly that he no longer has access to my details, my money, or my labor, I replied smoothly. Tell Jasmine I hope she enjoys the hot dogs. And tell Terrence his real match is waiting for him in the living room. Maybe she can influence some better food for you all. Before Lucas could utter another ridiculous word, I pulled the phone away from my ear and ended the call. I immediately opened his contact profile and blocked his number, just as I had done with Terrence and Jasmine. I placed my phone on the passenger seat, put my car into drive, and merged smoothly into the afternoon traffic. Tuesday afternoon arrived with the crisp efficiency I had come to expect from my new life. I sat in my corner office reviewing a highly confidential contract for a celebrity wedding when a sharp ping broke the silence. My personal phone rarely made that specific sound. I had assigned a custom alert to my primary banking application, ensuring I would immediately know if any significant activity occurred on my personal or corporate accounts. I picked up the device and looked at the glowing screen. A small notification box sat front and center, displaying a single beautiful word: declined. I swiped the screen to open the detailed banking dashboard. The transaction attempt was crystal clear. The merchant was the flagship Cartier boutique located in the most expensive shopping district in the city. The amount was exactly $15,450. The card used was the heavy metal corporate Black American Express, the same card Terrence had proudly carried in his designer wallet for the last 6 years. I leaned back in my ergonomic leather chair and let a slow, satisfied smile spread across my face. Today was Chloe's 28th birthday. I knew this trivial piece of information because Terrence had logged it into our co-parenting app 2 weeks ago, requesting to swap his custody weekend so he could properly celebrate his real match. He had spent the last week hyping up this birthday to anyone who would listen. He wanted to prove to Chloe, and more importantly to her shallow circle of internet-famous friends, that he was the ultimate high-value provider. He wanted to buy her loyalty with my money. My office line rang. The caller ID displayed a familiar number. It was Julian, the senior boutique manager at that exact Cartier location. Julian and I had a fantastic working relationship. I regularly purchased high-end client gifts from him for my luxury event planning agency. I answered the call on the first ring, keeping my voice completely professional. Good afternoon, Julian, I said easily. Maya, Julian whispered, his voice hushed and hurried. I am so sorry to bother you during business hours, but I am looking at a rather delicate situation on the showroom floor right now. Your husband Terrence is currently at one of my sales registers attempting to purchase a Diamond Panther watch. The corporate American Express card is declining. It is flagging as a hard stop on our end. Before my associate says anything further, I wanted to discreetly check with you. Did your bank place a fraud hold on the account? I spun my chair around to look out over the city skyline. Julian, I said calmly, there is no fraud hold. The card is declining because Terrence is no longer an authorized user on any account affiliated with Golden Horizon Holdings or myself. The account is completely secure. You are simply dealing with a man attempting to spend money he does not possess. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Julian was a consummate professional who dealt with wealthy clients daily. He instantly understood the underlying dynamics of the situation. "Understood, Maya," he replied smoothly. "How would you like us to handle the physical card?" "Cut it," I instructed without a single ounce of hesitation. Standard protocol for an unauthorized user attempting a five-figure transaction. "I will handle it personally," Julian said. "Just so you are aware, the situation out here is highly visible. The young woman with him is currently live streaming the purchase to her followers. Several of her friends are standing nearby, filming the transaction. He has been very loud about his intentions to spoil her today." I closed my eyes and savored the absolute perfection of the moment. "Thank you, Julian. Proceed with your protocol. Have a wonderful afternoon." I ended the call and placed the phone face down on my desk. The sheer magnitude of his impending humiliation was staggering. Terrence had built his entire identity on the perception of wealth. He craved the admiration of other men and the adoration of younger women who saw him as a financial savior. Now he was standing in front of his 28-year-old mistress and her camera-wielding friends about to be exposed as an absolute fraud. The fallout from the Cartier boutique did not stay contained within those glass walls. By Wednesday morning, the digital airwaves were buzzing with the predictable desperation of a 28-year-old influencer trying to save face. I was reviewing catering contracts for an upcoming charity gala when my assistant quietly placed a sleek silver tablet on my expansive desk. She did not say a single word to me. She simply tapped the glass screen to play a video and walked straight out of the office. It was a social media post from Chloe. She was sitting in the passenger seat of Terrence's Mercedes, the exact vehicle I had secretly paid off just 12 months prior, recording herself with a portable ring light clipped to the leather dashboard. The video was set to a trending audio clip about leveling up and knowing your worth. Chloe looked directly into the camera lens, pouting her perfectly glossed lips and tossing her long, expensive extensions over her shoulder. She delivered a highly scripted, deeply dramatic monologue about the intense trials of dating a successful corporate man who was constantly weighed down by his past. Finally finding a high-value man who knows how to treat a queen, she said to her followers, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness and profound entitlement. "It is just so sad when their bitter, broke ex-wives try to sabotage their blessings out of pure jealousy. But we do not let negative energy stop our bag. We just upgrade." The video already had 50,000 views and hundreds of supportive comments from strangers validating her delusional narrative. But what truly caught my attention was not Chloe's ridiculous performance. It was the top comment pinned right beneath the video for maximum visibility. The comment was from Jasmine. My former sister-in-law had eagerly shared the video to her own social media pages, adding a vicious paragraph of her own to fuel the fire. Jasmine wrote that it was beautiful to see her brother finally being appreciated by a real woman who truly understood his status and corporate caliber. She claimed I had been a terrible, ungrateful wife who completely neglected the home and focused entirely on a fake party planning business to mask my deep personal insecurities. She called me a gold digger who was angry that the gravy train had finally stopped. The sheer irony of her statement was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Jasmine, a woman who had practically lived off my secret financial generosity for a decade, was publicly defending the brother who was currently drowning in debt just to impress a girl half his age. I watched the video twice, my face a mask of absolute calm. I did not feel a spike in my blood pressure. I did not feel the sudden urge to draft a furious response defending my character or my bank account. I simply locked the tablet and handed it back to my assistant when she returned with my afternoon tea. "Let them post," I told her, my voice completely serene. "We have a massive gala to plan, and internet drama does not pay our invoices." While Chloe was busy crafting her victim narrative on the internet, Terrence was frantically trying to glue the pieces of his shattered ego back together. He had to explain to his mistress why a $15,000 transaction had been publicly rejected in front of her peers. Through Kendra's diligent legal monitoring of his remaining personal accounts, we knew exactly how he chose to handle the crisis. He lied through his teeth. He told Chloe it was a massive banking error, a security freeze triggered by a suspicious out-of-state purchase he had supposedly made the day prior. To prove that he was still the wealthy benefactor he claimed to be, Terrence shifted his spending into absolute overdrive. If he could not buy the luxury watch he had to compensate with extremely visible experiences, he took Chloe to an ultra-exclusive steakhouse downtown that exact same night. We saw the charge hit his personal Visa card, $700 for dry-aged ribeyes and imported wine. 2 days later, there was a $1,200 charge at a high-end boutique hotel for a spontaneous romantic weekend staycation. Another $800 went to reserving a VIP section at a trendy nightclub where Chloe could film herself drinking premium champagne. Kendra called me on Friday afternoon, her voice sharp and eager for a legal fight. She had seen the social media video and Jasmine's aggressive comments. "Maya, I have the cease and desist letters drafted, printed, and ready to go," she declared over the phone. "We can hit Chloe and Jasmine with severe defamation threats by 5 o'clock today. They are publicly damaging your reputation and calling you broke when you could buy and sell both of them before lunch. Let me release the hounds." I smiled, looking at a beautiful frame photograph of Malik and Tiana sitting on my desk. "No, Kendra." I said, my voice steady and completely unbothered. "Put the letters away. We are not responding to any of this." Kendra was silent for a long moment, clearly frustrated by my lack of aggression. "You want to let them drag your name through the mud on the internet, Maya. This is your brand we are talking about. You cannot just sit back and let them control the narrative." "My clients do not care about internet drama," I explained, leaning back in my chair. "The people who pay me hundreds of thousands of dollars to orchestrate their corporate events and luxury weddings do not follow 28-year-old influencers or bitter suburban sisters. Responding to them gives them the exact validity they are desperate for. It shows them that they struck a nerve and that I am paying attention. If I send a cease and desist, Chloe will just make another dramatic video crying about how the bitter ex-wife is using expensive lawyers to bully her. It feeds her content machine. Right now, Terrence is spending money he does not possess to prove a point to a woman who will leave him the very second the funds dry up. Let him dig his own grave. If I interrupt him now, I might accidentally save him from the consequences of his own hubris." I hung up the phone and closed my laptop, ensuring my boundaries remained impenetrable. My only focus was my business and my children. That weekend, I dedicated every ounce of my energy to Malik and Tiana. We spent Saturday morning at a private art showing, exposing them to culture and creativity. Sunday afternoon was spent baking intricate pastries in our expansive kitchen, filling the house with warmth and laughter. I listened to their stories, I helped with their complex school projects, and I ensured our home remained a fortress of absolute peace and emotional stability. Terrence was noticeably absent from their weekend, entirely consumed by his desperate campaign to maintain Chloe's affection. He did not ask to see them. He did not ask how their week had been. He was too busy maxing out his last remaining credit card at a lavish rooftop brunch to remember he was a father. Friday at 4 o'clock was usually a transition period in our household. The golden afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of the foyer where Malik and Tiana had their weekend bags neatly lined up by the door. It was Terrence's scheduled visitation weekend. Per the custody arrangement we had established through the lawyers, he was supposed to pick them up at exactly 5. Tiana was wearing her favorite sequined sneakers, practically vibrating with the anticipation of showing her father the ballet routine she had perfected. Malik stood quieter, leaning against the console table, tapping his phone against his palm. I was in my home office wrapping up a vendor contract when my phone illuminated with a notification from the CO parenting app. I opened the message. It was from Terrence, sent at 4:15. Just 45 minutes before he was legally obligated to be sitting in my driveway. The message was brief, callous, and entirely transparent. "Maya, I am not going to make it this weekend. I have an emergency client meeting in Miami that I cannot reschedule. Tell the kids I will make it up to them next time. Do not make a big deal out of this. Miami. An emergency client meeting. I almost laughed at the sheer laziness of the lie. I did not need to guess what was actually happening in the Sunshine State. Following the absolute humiliation at the Cartier boutique, Terrence was in severe damage control mode with Chloe. She was likely throwing a massive tantrum over the declined card and the embarrassment she suffered in front of her influencer friends. To keep his real match from walking out the door, Terrence had undoubtedly booked a last-minute trip to South Beach on his rapidly maxing out personal credit cards. He chose to salvage his fragile ego and appease a 28-year-old mistress, rather than spend 2 days with the children he claimed were his legacy. I looked through the glass French doors of my office at my son and daughter waiting patiently in the foyer. A fierce protective anger flared in my chest, but I did not let it reach my face. I walked out to the hallway, my posture relaxed and my voice completely steady. Before I broke the news to them, I took a crucial moment to secure my future. I opened the CO Parenting app and responded to his message. Terrence, acknowledging your cancellation for your scheduled custody weekend with Malik and Tiana with 45 minutes of notice. The children were packed and waiting. This time will be logged as forfeited. I did not type another word. I took a screenshot of his cancellation in my response. I uploaded it directly to the legal tracking folder Kendra and I shared. Every single time he failed to show up, every time he canceled at the last minute, every time he prioritized his fake luxury lifestyle over his actual flesh and blood, I documented it with terrifying precision. He thought he was just skipping a weekend. He did not realize he was actively building the exact case I needed to secure full permanent legal and physical custody. A judge would look at this digital paper trail and see a father who consistently abandoned his obligations. Terrence was handing me the keys to my children's absolute protection, and he was too distracted by the neon lights of Miami to even notice. I stepped into the foyer and knelt down to Tiana's eye level, placing a gentle hand on Malik's shoulder. I need to tell you both something, I said, keeping my tone warm and entirely devoid of any bitterness. Your dad just messaged me. He had a sudden work emergency out of town, and he will not be able to pick you up this weekend. Tiana's face fell instantly. Her lower lip trembled as she looked down at her sequined sneakers. But I was going to show him my pirouettes, she whispered. I pulled her into a tight embrace, smoothing her braided hair. I know, baby girl, I said softly. He is missing out on a beautiful performance, but that just means I get a private front row seat all to myself this weekend. Tiana accepted the comfort, easily bouncing back with the resilience of a 9-year-old who implicitly trusted her mother. She grabbed her bag and skipped toward the kitchen to find a snack. But Malik did not move. At 12 years old, he was incredibly observant. He possessed a quiet intelligence that caught every subtle shift in the air. He looked at the heavy wooden front door and then up at me, his dark eyes reflecting a maturity he should not have needed yet. He is not working, is he? Malik asked, his voice tight. He is always busy lately. Even when he was living here, he was always looking at his phone or leaving the house. Does he not want to be around us anymore? My heart ached for my son. The instinct to validate his pain by exposing Terrence's lies was strong. I wanted to tell him about the mistress, the financial ruin, the pathetic trip to Miami. But doing so would only weaponize my child and lower me to the level of a bitter ex-wife. I was a queen, and queens protect the realm. They do not poison the water supply. I guided Malik to the plush bench in the hallway and sat beside him. I looked him directly in the eyes, ensuring he felt the full weight of my honesty. Malik, I said, measuring my words with absolute care. Your father is going through a period where his priorities are very mixed up. He is making choices about his time that are difficult to understand, but I need you to hear me clearly right now. His choices reflect where he is at in his own life. They do not reflect your worth. There is nothing wrong with you, and there is nothing you could have done differently to make him stay home. You and your sister are the greatest things that have ever happened to either of us. Malik looked down at his hands, processing the information. You are not mad at him, he asked quietly. I am disappointed that he is missing time with you, I answered truthfully. Because you are an incredible young man, and anyone would be lucky to spend a Saturday with you. But I am not going to let his absence ruin our weekend. We define our own happiness in this house. Do you understand? He looked up at me, the heavy sadness in his eyes giving way to a small, genuine smile. He nodded, leaning against my shoulder. I understand, Mom. I stood up, clapping my hands together to shift the energy in the room. Good, I declared, my voice bright and commanding. Because sitting around this house is absolutely not on the agenda for this weekend. Go tell your sister to pack a different kind of bag. We are going into the city. I booked the presidential suite at a 5-star boutique hotel I frequently contracted for corporate retreats. The general manager greeted us at the door with a silver tray of sparkling cider for the kids and a glass of vintage champagne for me. The suite was magnificent, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering skyline, a massive soaking tub, and a private dining area. Tiana spun in circles across the plush carpet, her disappointment over her father entirely forgotten, while Malik immediately commandeered the grand piano in the corner, picking out a melody. As Sunday evening approached, we packed our bags to head back to our estate. Malik carried his weekend bag to the elevator, looking relaxed and happy. He bumped his shoulder against mine, grinning. "This was the best weekend ever, Mom," he said. "Way better than just going to Dad's old apartment." I smiled, wrapping my arm around his shoulder. "It sure was, baby." I drove us home, the city lights blurring into the suburban darkness as we returned to our sanctuary. When the kids were asleep, I finally sat down in my home office with a cup of herbal tea. I opened my banking app to review my corporate ledgers. It was a habit that grounded me. While scrolling through the accounts, I noticed a small red flag notification flashing on my secure dashboard. The bank's fraud protection department had sent an urgent alert requiring my immediate attention. I clicked the notification, opening the detailed report. The document loaded on my screen, and I felt a cold, sharp smile touch my lips. Terrence had just made the most catastrophic mistake of his entire life. The Cartier decline must have pushed him over the edge. The Miami trip must have completely drained his last remaining personal credit lines. Desperate, terrified, and drowning in the reality of his fake wealth, he had crossed a boundary from simple financial irresponsibility straight into federal territory. According to the bank alert, Terrence had attempted to initiate a massive cash-out refinance. He was trying to take out a second mortgage on the $1.2 million estate where I and his children slept. And to do it, he had electronically forged my signature. I leaned back in my chair, the soft glow of the monitor illuminating the dark room. He had just handed me the final nail for his coffin. The red flag alert blinked steadily on my computer monitor, illuminating the dark mahogany of my home office desk. My banking institution catered specifically to high-net-worth individuals and corporate entities. Their fraud protection algorithms were aggressive, highly sensitive, and incredibly thorough. An unusual request for a massive cash-out refinance on a primary commercial asset triggered an immediate manual review. I clicked the secure link, verifying my identity with dual authentication protocols. The digital application loaded onto my high-resolution screen. I read through the extensive paperwork with a mixture of absolute disgust and genuine amusement. Terrence had filled out the entire loan application using his new downtown apartment as his primary mailing address, but listing my beautiful estate as the collateral. He had requested an equity pull of $250,000. $250,000 to fund his mistress and prop up his fragile ego. I scrolled down to the final page of the digital banking document. There, sitting clearly on the authorization line, was an electronic signature bearing my full legal name. The security log provided the exact IP address used for the signature stamp. The location originated from a mobile network in Miami, Florida, the exact city where Terrence was currently vacationing with Chloe. He actually thought it would work. He genuinely believed that because we were legally married, the bank would just push the paperwork through without verifying the corporate ownership structure of the property. He thought he could quietly extract $250,000 from my hidden wealth, and I would simply not notice until the mortgage statement arrived the following month. The sheer stupidity of his plan was breathtaking to witness. He had crossed the definitive line from a cheating entitled husband into a federal criminal. If I were the emotionally reactive woman he constantly accused me of being, I would have picked up my phone right then. I would have bypassed the CEO parenting app called his luxury hotel room in Miami and screamed at him until my voice went hoarse. I would have demanded explanations and hurled insults about his reckless behavior. I would have given him the exact chaotic fight he expected, allowing him to paint me as the bitter, unhinged ex-wife in front of Chloe. But I was not that woman anymore. I was a queen playing chess while he was stumbling blindly through the dark playing checkers. I did not call Terrence. I did not send an angry message through our portal. I simply picked up my phone and dialed the direct extension for my dedicated wealth manager at the bank. The line rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered the call. "Good morning, Maya. How can I assist you today?" "Good morning, Robert," I replied, my voice completely smooth and unhurried. "I am calling regarding the urgent fraud alert generated on my primary real estate holding account. I am looking at a cash-out refinance application that was submitted yesterday evening." "Yes, Maya," Robert said, his tone shifting instantly into serious corporate protocol. "Our security team flagged the application due to the destination routing number. The funds were requested to be deposited into a personal checking account that was recently decoupled from your primary holding company. We needed to verify that you authorized this massive equity withdrawal before moving forward." I leaned back in my leather chair, looking out the window at the manicured green lawn of my estate. "Robert," I said, speaking very clearly for the recorded banking line, "I absolutely did not authorize this transaction. I did not sign this document. I am currently sitting in my home office in Atlanta. The internet address on the digital signature stamp is located in Miami. This is a highly fraudulent application." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the secure line. "Understood, Maya," Robert said, typing rapidly on his keyboard. "We are immediately freezing the application. I will need to transfer you directly to our Federal Fraud Investigation Unit to open a formal case. Since the requested amount exceeds $200,000, this automatically triggers a felony-level review by our security directors. Are you prepared to officially contest the signature today?" "I am fully prepared, Robert," I replied without a single ounce of hesitation. I was promptly transferred to a senior fraud investigator named Detective Evans. For the next 45 minutes, I calmly and methodically provided every single piece of documentation he requested. I uploaded the original articles of incorporation for Golden Horizon Holdings, proving my sole and absolute ownership of the estate. I provided the legal separation documents Kendra had drafted, showing the exact date Terrence was legally removed from all financial accounts. I even provided the time-stamped screenshot from the CO parenting app where Terrence explicitly admitted he was in Miami, proving he was the one utilizing the network associated with the forged signature. I gave the banking institution a perfectly wrapped bow-tied case of federal wire fraud and identity theft. Detective Evans was highly professional, but I could hear the absolute certainty in his voice as he reviewed the files. "This is extremely clear-cut, Maya," he assured me. "We have a mountain of irrefutable evidence. The application is dead in the water and your assets are completely secure. The bank will take over the active investigation from here. We take the fraudulent leveraging of our clients' commercial assets very seriously. We will be reaching out to the applicant directly to proceed." "Will he be arrested?" I asked, my tone reflecting nothing more than polite business curiosity. "With wire fraud of this magnitude involving interstate networks, we hand our findings directly over to the authorities," Detective Evans explained calmly. "The local branches will handle the initial internal interviews to lock down his official statement, but the criminal charges will follow shortly after that. I strongly advise you to notify your divorce attorney immediately." I thanked the detective for his time and ended the secure call. I immediately updated Kendra, sending her the confirmation number for the active fraud investigation. She replied a minute later with a single message reading "Checkmate." The trap was completely set, and the absolute beauty of it was the profound silence. Terrence had absolutely no idea what was coming for him. He was likely sitting by a sparkling pool in South Beach, sipping an overpriced cocktail, thinking he had just solved all of his mounting financial problems. He was probably mentally spending the $250,000, already planning which luxury car he would lease next, or what designer jewelry he would buy to keep Chloe smiling for the cameras. He thought the massive deposit would hit his account in a few business days. He truly thought he was untouchable. I placed my phone face down on the desk and stood up, smoothing my tailored trousers. I walked out of my quiet office and into the sunlit kitchen to prepare an afternoon snack for Malik and Tiana. I felt no guilt over what I had done. I felt no hesitation about the future. Terrence had spent our entire marriage treating me like an employee. He had tried to steal from his own children to fund his young mistress. He had dug a massive financial grave and cheerfully jumped right into it. My only job now was to stand back and watch the dirt fall. The silent, heavy wheels of a federal fraud investigation were turning, and Terrence was going to be completely crushed beneath them while I remained entirely at peace. I returned to my agency on Monday morning, feeling the kind of deep restorative peace that only comes from perfect execution. The weekend with my children had completely reset my spirit, while the gears of federal justice slowly began to grind my ex-husband into dust. Terrence flew back from Miami on a commercial red-eye flight entirely unaware of the invisible net closing tightly around his tailored suit. I would later learn from Kendra's meticulous legal updates and the resulting court discovery files exactly how his Tuesday morning unraveled. It was a masterclass in narcissistic delusion colliding with bureaucratic reality. Terrence received a highly professional phone call from the downtown banking center on Monday afternoon. The representative politely informed him that there was a minor administrative flag on his cash-out refinance application. They requested he come into the branch the following morning to verify some standard paperwork and clear the hold so the $250,000 could be processed. Terrence heard the word processed and completely lost his mind with greed. He assumed the bank was rolling out the red carpet for a high-net-worth client. He showed up at the bank at 9 o'clock sharp, wearing one of his expensive silk ties and exuding the aggressive corporate charm he used to close regional sales deals. He approached the receptionist acting like he owned the building, demanding to see the senior loan officer. Instead, he was escorted into a windowless interior conference room. Waiting for him were not eager loan officers, but two senior investigators from the Federal Fraud Division. They did not introduce themselves as fraud agents. They kept their titles vague, allowing Terrence's monumental ego to fill in the blanks. They placed a printed copy of the digital application on the polished table. They asked Terrence to review the document and confirm that all the information provided was accurate to the best of his knowledge. Terrence did not even bother to read the fine print. He flashed his trademark winning smile, leaned back in the leather chair, and confidently declared that everything was in perfect order. Then the investigators pointed specifically to the electronic signature on the final page bearing my legal name. They asked him a direct, unambiguous question. "Sir, can you confirm that your wife Maya Anderson personally authorized and executed this digital signature on Sunday evening?" This was his out. This was his one final opportunity to claim a misunderstanding, to withdraw the application, or to invent an excuse about a technical glitch. But Terrence was too arrogant to recognize a trap, even when his foot was resting squarely on the trigger. He looked the investigators dead in the eye and lied with absolute terrifying ease. "Yes, gentlemen," he told them smoothly. "My wife and I reviewed the documents together in our home office before our trip. She signed it right in front of me. We are utilizing the equity for a new investment property." The investigators simply nodded, taking careful notes. They thanked him for his time and his absolute clarity on the matter. They did not arrest him right then. They let him stand up, shake their hands, and walk right out the front door of the bank. They wanted his verbal confirmation recorded and officially documented, adding the charge of making false statements to a financial institution right on top of the felony wire fraud. Terrence walked to his leased Mercedes feeling like an absolute king, completely oblivious to the fact that he had just officially confessed to a federal crime. While Terrence was busy cementing his own criminal record, a completely different kind of disaster was unfolding 20 miles away, at a suburban branch of the exact same banking institution. Lucas, my condescending, constantly mansplaining brother-in-law, was sitting in his cramped office, eating a sad-packed lunch. Lucas was a mid-level branch manager. He had limited regional access to the internal banking database and a massive inferiority complex when it came to his brother-in-law. He constantly monitored Terrence's financial moves, trying to figure out how a regional sales vice president afforded country club memberships and million-dollar estates. That Tuesday afternoon, a highly classified internal security bulletin flashed across the regional manager dashboard. It was a system-wide alert regarding a compromised high-value account. Lucas immediately recognized Terrence's legal name and social security number attached to the red-flagged file. His heart rate likely spiked with pure envious curiosity. Lucas assumed Terrence was closing a massive commercial deal or triggering VIP security protocols for a huge cash transfer. Unable to suppress his nosy suburban entitlement, Lucas bypassed his standard clearance and dug into the flagged profile. What Lucas found in those digital files did not spark envy. It sparked absolute cold-sweating terror. The internal system laid bare the complete, unvarnished reality of Terrence's financial existence. Lucas stared at his computer screen, his jaw practically hitting his desk. There were no hidden trust funds. There were no massive corporate bonuses. There were no secret investment portfolios. There was only a mediocre checking account completely drained by Miami hotel charges and expensive steakhouse dinners. There were 3 personal credit cards glowing red with 24% interest rates, all completely maxed out to their highest limits. Terrence had absolutely zero liquid assets. He was poorer than the tellers working at Lucas's front counter. But the credit card debt was not what made Lucas drop his sandwich. It was the screaming red banner attached to the $250,000 loan application. The internal notes written by the Senior Fraud Division were explicitly clear. The application was frozen pending federal indictment for identity theft and wire fraud. The notes detailed that the collateral property, the massive estate Jasmine and Lucas constantly bragged about visiting, was owned entirely by an entity called Golden Horizon Holdings. Lucas clicked on the LLC ownership structure. The screen clearly displayed my name. Maya Anderson, sole proprietor. 100% ownership. Lucas sat in his cheap office chair while his entire worldview shattered into a million jagged pieces. He traced the routing numbers on the accounts. He saw the automated transfers that funded the country club, the car leases, and the lifestyle they had all worshipped. Every single dollar flowed directly from Golden Horizon Holdings. Terrence was not the king. Terrence was a heavily subsidized dependent. And more importantly, Maya, the quiet event planner. They constantly disrespected the woman Lucas had dared to lecture about family obligations over a plate of burnt hot dogs, was the sole financial engine keeping their entire delusional family afloat. Panic is a highly contagious disease, especially among the entitled. Lucas abruptly logged out of the system, grabbed his suit jacket, and abandoned his branch in the middle of the afternoon. He drove his sensible mid-sized sedan 20 miles over the speed limit until he reached his suburban split-level house. He burst through the front door, breathless and pale, terrifying his wife. Jasmine was sitting in the living room browsing online for luxury vacation rentals she expected Terrence to eventually pay for. She took one look at her husband's ashen face and dropped her phone. "Lucas, what is wrong?" she demanded, standing up. "Did someone die?" "Worse," Lucas gasped, loosening his tie as he paced across the cheap laminate flooring. "Terrence is broke, Jasmine. He is completely, entirely flat broke." Jasmine let out a sharp, dismissive laugh, crossing her arms. "Lucas, do not be ridiculous. Terrence makes nearly $200,000 a year. He just leased that penthouse downtown. He is taking Chloe to Miami. He is fine. Maya is the one losing her mind. He is not paying for any of it," Lucas shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria. "I just saw the internal bank files, Jasmine. He has no money. His credit cards are maxed out." Maya cut him off. "Everything, the house, the cars, the club, it is all owned by a corporate holding company that Maya controls exclusively. Your brother is essentially a minimum wage employee playing dress-up in her clothes." Jasmine froze, the smug confidence draining from her face. "That is impossible," she whispered. "Terrence told me he was the primary earner. He said her little party business just paid for her shopping habits." "Her little party business generates more revenue in a month than my branch does in a year," Lucas yelled, grabbing his hair. "But that is not even the worst part, Jasmine. Terrence tried to pull $250,000 in equity out of Maya's house to pay his debts. He forged her signature on a federal banking application. The fraud department flagged it. They are building a criminal case against him right now. He is going to federal prison, Jasmine. The silence in that suburban living room must have been absolute perfection. Jasmine sank back onto the couch, her knees giving out completely. The reality of her own behavior crashed down on her. She had spent the last week dragging Maya's name through the mud on the internet. She had publicly cheered for Chloe. She had mocked the very woman who had secretly paid for her high-end catering, her expensive gifts, and her social standing for the last 10 years. What do we do? Jasmine whispered, her voice trembling with genuine fear. The realization hit them both simultaneously. If Terrence was broke and facing felony charges, he would inevitably come begging to them for legal fees and bailout money. He would drag them directly into his massive financial crater. And the $20,000 loan Terrence had supposedly given them from his own pocket to remodel their kitchen last year. Where did that actually come from? If it came from Maya, she could legally demand it back. We do absolutely nothing, Lucas said, his eyes wide with self-preservation. We distance ourselves immediately. We cannot afford to be attached to a federal fraud investigation. If Maya decides to audit where her money went, she could sue us for receiving stolen funds. We have to cut Terrence off before he drags us down with him. The fierce, unbreakable family loyalty they constantly preached about evaporated the second the money disappeared. They did not care about Terrence's well-being. They only cared about protecting their own fragile suburban existence. The false king was about to be executed by the bank, and his royal court was already sprinting for the emergency exits. I was sitting quietly in my immaculate kitchen, helping Tiana with her math homework, completely serene, while the empire they built on my back burned straight to the ground. Chloe was a creature built entirely of validation and ring lights. She operated on a currency of likes, shares, and perceived envy. Following the catastrophic embarrassment at the Cartier boutique and the frantic damage control trip to Miami, her digital audience was growing suspicious. I monitored her public social media accounts from a burner profile simply to keep a strategic eye on Terrence's accelerating downfall. Her followers were leaving comments asking why the wealthy executive she bragged about had not put a ring on her finger yet. They noticed the lack of a new Cartier watch. They noticed she was recycling older designer bags in her recent posts. The internet is a ruthless place for women who base their entire worth on the financial capacity of the men they date. Chloe was feeling the heat, and she directed all of that scalding pressure squarely onto Terrence. She did not care about his actual financial health because he had sold her a complete fantasy. To Chloe, Terrence was a bottomless cash machine. She gave him an ultimatum disguised as a romantic milestone. They had been sneaking around for exactly 1 year, and she demanded a massive combined anniversary and engagement party. She wanted to invite 200 of her most influential internet friends, local minor celebrities, and other lifestyle bloggers to witness her ultimate triumph. She told him that if he could not publicly claim her and provide the luxury standard she deserved, she would pack her bags and find a man who could. She posted a cryptic video about knowing when to walk away from men who stall, and I watched Terrence panic in real time. He was terrified of losing his young trophy. He was terrified she would take to the internet and expose him as a fraud. He needed to lock her down and blind her with an event so spectacular it would silence every single one of her digital critics. But Chloe did not just want a standard hotel ballroom or a nice country club. She had a very specific target in mind. She demanded the party be held at the Monarch. The Monarch was an absolute crown jewel in the city's luxury event scene. It was a restored historic bank building in the heart of the financial district, featuring towering marble columns, gold leaf vaulted ceilings, and a massive central atrium that screamed generational wealth. It was the kind of venue where professional athletes, politicians, and legitimate corporate titans hosted their private galas. You could not simply call the Monarch and book a room. It was exclusively available by invitation or through deeply vetted industry connections. The waiting list was over 2 years long for the general public. It commanded a premium minimum spend that would make a sensible person choke. Chloe wanted it because another rival influencer had failed to secure it for her own wedding. Getting the Monarch was the ultimate status symbol. It was the holy grail of aesthetic backdrops for her social media feed. Terence, of course, agreed immediately. He possessed a dangerous combination of unearned arrogance and absolute financial illiteracy. He thought his regional vice president title and his tailored suits gave him a backstage pass to the world of the ultra-wealthy. He assumed he could just charm an event coordinator, sign a contract, and throw the massive rental fee onto a staggered monthly payment plan. He had absolutely no idea that venues of this caliber required astronomical cash deposits up front. He was operating under the delusion that his pending forged mortgage application would magically clear in time to cover the extravagant costs. He was making promises with money that did not exist, relying on a federal crime that was currently unraveling in a bank security office. Chloe did not care about the logistics. She only cared about the aesthetics. The moment Terence promised her the monarch, her entire demeanor shifted. She went from posting cryptic warnings about leaving him to filming breathless updates about her secret upcoming luxury engagement. She dragged Terence to high-end boutiques to try on custom evening gowns, insisting he foot the bill for a dress worthy of the venue. She hired a professional photography team to document her arrival at the party, completely oblivious to the fact that her wealthy provider was currently sweating through his tailored shirts trying to figure out how to pay them. She was a leech draining a dry well, and Terence was too desperate to tell her no. Desperate to keep Chloe posting happy updates, Terence went into overdrive. He could not approach the monarch directly because they did not take cold calls from the general public. Instead, he reached out to a third-party luxury concierge service he had used years ago when trying to impress his corporate bosses. He pressured the concierge, throwing his title around and making vague promises about bringing immense corporate accounts to their portfolio if they could secure the monarch for his private event. The concierge service, eager for the commission, utilized their industry back channels to submit a formal booking request. Terence pushed them relentlessly, demanding miracles because he had less than a month to pull off the impossible. While the third-party vendor worked the logistics, Terence returned to his office feeling invincible. The sheer anxiety of his towering debt and the impending bank investigation was temporarily buried under a thick layer of narcissistic pride. He strutted through his regional sales department, acting as though he had just conquered the world. I heard about his office behavior through a senior sales director who had always respected me and frequently fed me information. Terence was standing by the high-end coffee machine, loudly boasting to his colleagues about the upcoming lavish event. He invited his regional director, his top-performing sales representatives, and several key clients. He bragged about the exclusive nature of the monarch, leaning casually against the counter, claiming he had pulled massive strings and leveraged his heavy influence to secure the building. He was creating a public spectacle, ensuring that his entire professional circle would be present to witness his crowning achievement. He wanted everyone to see him standing next to his young, beautiful new fiancée inside the most expensive building in the city. He was betting his entire professional and personal reputation on this single night. He was inviting the very people who controlled his career to watch him play the role of a titan. He promised them top-tier catering, premium open bars, and an atmosphere of pure, unadulterated luxury. He painted a picture of absolute success while secretly drowning in a sea of massive liabilities. Every single boast, every invitation handed out, every arrogant smirk in the break room only raised the stakes of his inevitable destruction. He was meticulously gathering an audience for his own execution. He truly believed he had outsmarted everyone. He thought he had outsmarted the bank, the credit card companies, and most importantly, me. He thought Maya, the quiet, reliable co-parent, was sitting in her suburban house weeping over his departure while he secured the ultimate symbol of victory. He lacked the basic instinct to look beneath the surface of the world he was trying to conquer. He was so blinded by his need to appease Chloe and impress his coworkers that he completely ignored the basic rules of high-end event planning. He did not read the fine print. He did not question why the third-party vendor was suddenly making headway on an impossible reservation. He just wanted the confirmation email so he could forward it to Chloe and watch her post it online. He needed that digital validation more than he needed oxygen. He wanted to see her face light up when she realized he had delivered the impossible. He wanted to secure his place in her world regardless of the catastrophic cost. Terrence was a man sprinting through a minefield with a blindfold on, convinced he was winning a race. He felt completely and utterly untouchable. He believed his own hype so deeply that reality no longer registered in his mind. The walls were closing in. The federal investigators were building their case, and his family was panicking. But Terrence was entirely focused on the guest list for his luxury engagement party. He ignored every single glaring warning sign that was flashing directly in his arrogant face. He dismissed the increasingly frantic text messages from Lucas and refused to answer his sister Jasmine when she called to warn him about the bank files. He thought the hardest part was over once the third-party vendor submitted the request. He had no idea that the request was heading straight into the hands of the one person who controlled his absolute fate. The quiet co-parent was waiting in the shadows, holding the keys to the kingdom he was desperately trying to rent. The trap was completely set, and Terrence was running full speed straight into the crushing steel jaws. What Terrence completely failed to understand about my event planning agency was the sheer magnitude of the assets I controlled. He had spent 10 years viewing my career as a cute little project involving balloons and seating charts. He never bothered to look at the commercial real estate portfolio that Golden Horizon Holdings had quietly amassed under his oblivious nose. 2 years ago, when the historic bank building in the financial district went up for private auction, I did not just plan events inside it. I bought the entire building. I spent millions restoring the towering marble columns, the gold leaf vaulted ceilings, and the massive central atrium. I rebranded it as the Monarch, and it instantly became the crown jewel of my corporate empire. It was the most exclusive, impossible to secure venue in the city, and I owned every single inch of the polished marble floors. Because I prefer to operate with absolute discretion, my name was never plastered on the front doors. The Monarch was managed through a subsidiary trust and operated by a highly paid venue director named Marcus, who reported directly to me. To the public and the elite socialites clamoring for a reservation, the Monarch was simply an untouchable fortress of luxury. Terrence had absolutely no idea that his quiet suburban co-parent held the deed to the exact building he was desperately trying to rent to impress his 28-year-old mistress. It was a crisp Thursday morning when the booking request officially crossed my desk. I was sipping my green tea and reviewing quarterly projections when Marcus walked into my private office. He carried a sleek leather folio containing the priority inquiries from third-party luxury concierge services. Marcus knew exactly who Terrence was. He had attended our firm holiday parties and had witnessed Terrence strutting around attempting to act like he was my boss. Marcus placed the folio on my desk with a highly amused smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Maya, we just received a rather fascinating expedited booking request," Marcus said, folding his hands behind his back. "A concierge service is begging for a cancellation slot next month. They are representing a regional sales executive who insists on throwing a massive engagement and anniversary party. The client claims he has massive corporate influence and is demanding a weekend date. The name on the file is Terrence." I slowly set my teacup down on the matching saucer. A genuine laugh bubbled up from my chest, echoing in the quiet office. I reached for the folio and opened it to the primary page. There, in black and white, was Terrence's name, his corporate email address, and his desperate plea to secure the venue. He was trying to book my building to propose to the woman he called his real match. The absolute poetic justice of the universe was almost too perfect to comprehend. He was running from a federal fraud investigation, drowning in maxed-out credit cards, and his grand solution was to knock on my front door and ask to rent my castle. "Do we decline the request?" Maya Marcus asked, raising an eyebrow. "I can tell the concierge service that our calendar is locked for the next 2 years." I looked at the meticulous paperwork tracing the signature line where Terrence would have to sign his life away. "No, Marcus," I replied, my voice smooth and dangerously calm. "We absolutely do not decline this request. We are going to approve it today. But we are going to significantly alter the standard contracting terms." Marcus leaned forward, pulling a silver pen from his jacket pocket. "Tell me how you want it structured." I looked directly at my venue director, outlining the trap with surgical precision. Terrence is an extreme flight risk and a highly volatile client. Because he is booking through a third-party vendor on incredibly short notice, we are applying our maximum liability protocol. There will be no payment plans, there will be no credit card authorizations. The total cost for the venue rental, the premium catering package, the top-tier open bar, and the mandatory security detail is $85,000. In order to secure the date, I require a 100% non-refundable cash deposit wired directly into the corporate holding account by close of business on Friday. If he misses the wire deadline, the offer is permanently revoked. Marcus wrote down the aggressive terms without a single flicker of hesitation. A 100% non-refundable cash wire for $85,000 is an ironclad corporate death sentence for a man with no liquid assets. Marcus nodded sharply, taking the folio back. I will send the terms to the concierge service immediately. They will relay the mandate to him within the hour. I turned my chair back toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I knew exactly what would happen the moment Terrence received that email. He was trapped in a psychological prison of his own making. He had already bragged to his regional director and his entire sales department that he secured the venue. He had already promised Chloe the event of her dreams, and she had already hired professional photographers to document her arrival. If he backed out now, his entire fragile facade would shatter publicly. He could not tell Chloe he could not afford it because her influencer brand demanded a high-value provider. He could not tell his colleagues the deal fell through because it would destroy his carefully cultivated image of corporate dominance. Terrence had to find $85,000 in liquid cash within 24 hours. He could not use his credit cards because they were glowing red and maxed out from the Miami trip. He could not use his regular bank accounts because the balance was pathetic. He definitely could not use the fraudulent cash-out refinance because the federal investigators had completely frozen the application. He had only one single remaining asset left to his name. He had his corporate retirement account. Over the last 10 years, Terrence had contributed to a standard 401k provided by his sales firm. Because I had secretly paid for all of our massive living expenses, he had managed to accumulate a decent balance in that specific portfolio. It was the only money he had actually earned and saved himself. Through my established legal tracking, I watched the financial execution unfold exactly as I predicted. Desperate, sweating, and completely cornered by his own lies, Terrence logged into his corporate retirement portal on Thursday afternoon. He initiated a massive hardship withdrawal against his own future. He liquidated $85,000, pulling the money directly out of his retirement savings. By executing a premature withdrawal, he instantly triggered massive tax penalties and severe early withdrawal fees, completely decimating his long-term financial security. He willingly destroyed the only legitimate asset he possessed just to rent a room for a single night. He was essentially burning his own house down to keep his mistress warm for a few hours. On Friday morning, I sat at my desk and logged into the secure banking dashboard for Golden Horizon Holdings. I watched the screen with absolute serenity. At exactly 10:15 in the morning, the digital ledger updated. An incoming wire transfer cleared the Federal Reserve and landed safely inside my corporate account. The amount was exactly $85,000. The sender was listed as Terrence. He had done it. He had actually drained the absolute last drop of his personal wealth and willingly handed it directly to his ex-wife. He had financed his own destruction and deposited his retirement savings straight into my business accounts. He paid me $85,000 to host the exact party where he would lose everything. I picked up my phone and called Kendra. She answered immediately, the sharp background noise of her law firm buzzing behind her. The wire just cleared, I told her, my voice entirely devoid of pity. He liquidated his retirement to pay the venue deposit. It is a non-refundable cash transfer. He is completely legally and financially empty. Kendra let out a low, appreciative whistle. The man is an absolute pioneer in the field of self-sabotage. He has no savings, no credit, no home equity, and an active felony fraud investigation breathing down his neck. He just paid you his last dime to throw a party he thinks will save him. Exactly, I said, closing the banking application. And the best part is he still thinks I am sitting in the suburbs crying over his departure. He has absolutely no idea who owns the building he just rented. Make sure your outfit for that party is flawless, Maya Kendra advised, her tone shifting into pure strategic anticipation. When you drop the hammer on him in front of that crowd, you need to look like the billionaire he pretended to be. I am wearing custom silk, I assured her. I will see you at the Monarch. I ended the call and leaned forward, resting my elbows on my heavy mahogany desk. Terrence thought he was leveling up. He thought Chloe was his real match because she demanded expensive things and validated his loud, insecure ego. He thought a co-parent was a subservient role reserved for women who lacked the intellect to challenge him. But a co-parent is a guardian. A co-parent is a protector of the future. By securing that $85,000 wire transfer, I had just successfully reclaimed the exact funds he should have been saving for Malik and Tiana's college tuition. I took his money, put it safely behind a corporate firewall, and ensured my children would never suffer for their father's reckless stupidity. The stage was completely set. The venue was booked. The catering was finalized. The lighting was programmed to perfection. Terrence was about to walk into the most expensive, beautiful trap ever constructed. He was going to put on his velvet tuxedo, hold the hand of his shiny young mistress, and smile for the cameras. He was going to stand under my gold leaf ceilings, drink my premium champagne, and boast to his colleagues about his untouchable status. And then I was going to walk through those heavy oak doors and pull the entire floor out from under him. The Monarch glowed with the kind of manufactured brilliance that only $85,000 of liquidated retirement funds could buy. I stood in the hidden observation alcove on the mezzanine level, looking down at the magnificent central atrium. My venue director, Marcus, stood quietly beside me, monitoring the floor through his earpiece. We had orchestrated an absolute masterpiece of a trap. The towering marble columns were wrapped in cascading white orchids and imported hydrangeas. The gold leaf vaulted ceilings caught the warm amber light of the massive crystal chandeliers, casting a rich, expensive glow over the 200 guests mingling below. Waiters in crisp black uniforms circulated with silver trays of premium champagne and perfectly constructed hors d'oeuvres. It was a scene straight out of a luxury magazine, and Terrence was eating up every single second of it. I watched my ex-husband holding court near the grand staircase. He was wearing a deep burgundy velvet tuxedo jacket with sharp black lapels, a look that screamed new money, trying desperately to imitate old wealth. He was holding a glass of top-shelf scotch, gesturing wildly as he told a story to a circle of his regional sales directors and corporate vice presidents. He threw his head back in laughter, acting like the undisputed king of Atlanta. He wanted his bosses to see him as a financial titan, a man who could easily drop $250,000 on a venue just to celebrate an anniversary. He was aggressively projecting power, entirely unaware that his checking account was currently hovering near zero, and federal agents were actively building a wire fraud case against him. A few feet away, Chloe was in her element. She wore a sheer, heavily beaded silver gown that was entirely inappropriate for a formal engagement party, but perfect for a viral social media post. She was surrounded by a swarm of lifestyle influencers holding professional lighting rings and recording every angle of the opulent room. Chloe kept touching her hair and pointing up at the vaulted ceilings, ensuring her followers knew exactly how exclusive this building was. She thought she had secured the ultimate high-value provider. She thought she had won the jackpot. Near the premium open bar, I spotted Terrence's family. Jasmine was draped in a loud sequined dress, holding her champagne flute like a scepter. She was loudly boasting to one of Chloe's friends about her brother's incredible success, completely buying into the illusion that Terrence had funded this night out of his vast corporate wealth. But right beside her, Lucas painted a very different picture. My brother-in-law stood rigid against the brass railing, clutching a glass of club soda. He was sweating profusely through his standard gray suit. His eyes darted nervously around the room, jumping at every loud noise. Lucas had seen the internal banking files. Lucas knew about the forged mortgage application and the frozen accounts. He knew Terrence was totally broke and facing federal indictment, but he had clearly kept his mouth shut, terrified of ruining the party or taking the blame. He looked like a man standing on the deck of the Titanic, pretending not to notice the water rising around his ankles. I checked my watch. It was exactly 9 o'clock in the evening, the prime hour. The room was at maximum capacity, and the speeches were scheduled to begin in 15 minutes. I turned to Marcus and gave a single sharp nod. Marcus spoke softly into his radio, instructing the security team stationed at the main entrance. I turned away from the observation window and made my way down the private spiral staircase that led to the grand foyer. I did not rush. I moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a woman who owned the ground she walked on. I was not dressed for a fight. I was dressed for an execution. I wore a custom-tailored emerald green silk gown that draped flawlessly over my figure. It was understated, elegant, and radiated quiet, untouchable wealth. I wore no flashy logos and no cheap rhinestones. My only jewelry was the vintage diamond drop earrings my father had left me and a simple platinum tennis bracelet. My hair was pulled back into a sleek, flawless chignon, and my makeup was sharp and pristine. I did not look like a bitter, discarded wife. I looked like the chief executive officer of a highly lucrative empire. I reached the heavy oak double doors that separated the foyer from the main atrium. Two of my security guards stood at attention waiting for my signal. I took a deep, steadying breath, letting the absolute certainty of my victory settle into my bones. I raised my hand and the guards pulled the heavy brass handles, pulling the massive doors wide open. My entrance was completely unannounced, but the visual impact was immediate and devastating. I stepped across the threshold and into the golden light of the atrium. The string quartet positioned on the stage happened to hit a quiet lull in their performance, right as the heavy oak doors echoed shut behind me. The sound drew the attention of the guests standing near the entrance. They turned around and the conversation instantly died on their lips. The silence acted like a virus spreading rapidly through the massive room. Group by group, people stopped talking, lowered their glasses, and turned to stare. Chloe's influencer friends dropped their recording lights. The corporate vice presidents paused their networking. I walked slowly across the polished marble floor, the emerald silk of my gown trailing beautifully behind me. I kept my posture perfectly straight, my chin raised and my eyes locked dead ahead. I did not look around nervously. I did not seek validation from the crowd. I commanded the space by simply existing within it. I saw Jasmine lower her champagne glass, her mouth falling open in sheer shock. She instinctively grabbed Lucas by the arm, pointing a trembling finger in my direction. Lucas looked at me, and his face drained of all remaining color. He practically shrank behind his wife, knowing instantly that the financial reckoning he had been dreading all week had finally arrived. In the center of the room, Terrence turned around to see what had silenced his audience. His smile vanished instantly, replaced by a mask of sudden, explosive rage. He had spent the last 2 weeks building a fragile monument to his own ego, and here was the woman he had tried to erase walking straight into his sanctuary, looking like absolute royalty. The sight of me, calm, wealthy, and completely unbothered, shattered his carefully constructed facade. His narcissistic pride could not handle the intrusion. He needed to assert his dominance immediately to prove to Chloe and his bosses that he was in control. Terrence shoved his way through the crowd, his velvet jacket catching the light as he marched aggressively toward the center of the room to intercept me. He closed the distance, stopping just 3 feet in front of me, blocking my path to the stage. His face was flushed red with anger, and the veins in his neck stood out sharply against his crisp white collar. He did not care that 200 people were watching us with bated breath. He only cared about protecting his territory. "What are you doing here?" Maya Terrence demanded, his voice loud and projecting across the silent marble room. I stopped walking, resting my hands loosely in front of me. I looked at his furious face, taking in the sheer panic, hiding just behind his aggressive posture. I did not say a word, allowing his anger to echo in the quiet space. Terrence took a step closer, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate me. "I told you," he snarled, ensuring his words reached the ears of his corporate colleagues and his mistress, who was watching from the sidelines. "You do not belong here. This is an exclusive event. You cannot just crash my night because you are bitter and lonely. Security is going to remove you right now. Turn around and walk out, Maya." This night is for my real match. He pointed a dramatic finger toward the heavy oak doors waiting for me to crumble. He expected me to cry. He expected me to yell and cause a chaotic suburban scene that would validate every horrible lie he had told Chloe and his family about my emotional instability. He wanted me to look crazy so he could look like the rational victim. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I did not shed a single tear. I looked at his outstretched hand, then slowly brought my gaze back up to meet his furious eyes. A slow, bright, genuinely amused smile spread across my face. It was the smile of a predator watching a mouse walk willingly into a steel trap. The absolute serenity of my expression unsettled him deeply, causing him to falter and drop his hand to his side. I looked past him, making direct eye contact with Marcus, who was standing near the edge of the stage. I raised my hand, giving a subtle, graceful gesture. "Marcus, a microphone, please," I said, my voice smooth, clear, and carrying effortlessly through the dead silent room. Marcus immediately stepped forward, holding a sleek wireless microphone. He bypassed Terrence completely, treating him like an invisible obstacle, and placed the microphone directly into my outstretched hand. He gave me a polite professional nod and stepped back into the shadows. I gripped the cool metal of the microphone and turned my attention back to the man who thought he could replace me. The velvet ropes had dropped, the audience was captive, and the false king was standing right on the trap door. It was time to pull the lever. I tapped the microphone twice. The sharp thud echoed through the atrium, commanding the attention of every person in the room. 200 pairs of eyes locked onto me. Terrence stood inches away, his face a mask of confused fury. He was waiting for the hysterical ex-wife narrative he had sold to his colleagues to finally materialize. Instead, I offered the room a warm smile. "Good evening to everyone here," I said. "My name is Maya Anderson. I am Terrence's former wife, and I am the sole owner and chief executive officer of the Monarch." The collective gasp from the crowd was audible. Shocked whispers rolled through the sea of designer dresses. Terrence physically recoiled as if I had struck him across the face. He blinked rapidly, opening and closing his mouth in shock. "That is a lie." Terrence stammered, his voice cracking as he looked around at his colleagues. "She is just an event planner. She does not own this." Marcus stepped out of the shadows holding a laminated document. He did not use a microphone, but his authoritative voice carried perfectly. "Maya Anderson holds the deed to this historic property through her primary corporate entity, Golden Horizon Holdings," Marcus announced. "She is the supreme authority in this building." I turned my attention back to Terrence, my smile never wavering. "I really must thank you, Terrence," I continued, ensuring every syllable reached the back of the room. "When my venue director informed me that a concierge service was trying to secure a last-minute booking for you, I was flattered. I was even more impressed when you wired the $85,000 non-refundable cash deposit into my business accounts yesterday. It takes dedication to liquidate your entire corporate retirement account, paying severe withdrawal penalties just to rent my building for 4 hours. Thank you for your generous contribution to my expanding real estate portfolio." The color drained from Terrence's face, leaving him a sickening shade of gray. The arrogant strut and fake billionaire persona evaporated instantly. He looked like a hollow shell of a man. Behind him, Chloe dropped her cell phone. The device clattered against the marble floor, shattering the screen. She stared at Terrence with wide, horrified eyes, realizing that the wealthy provider she had been bragging about had just spent his absolute last dime renting a room from his ex-wife. I calmly reached into my designer handbag and pulled out a sleek, matte black leather folder. I held it up for the crowd to see, feeling the heavy weight of the legal documents inside. I stepped closer to Terrence, forcing him to look directly at the consequences of his arrogance. "Since we are gathered to celebrate your new life, I thought I would bring you some closing documents from your old one," I said. I opened the folder, keeping my eyes locked onto his terrified face. I pulled out the first white document. "First, I have the finalized divorce decree," I announced, holding the paper up. "Signed, sealed, and officially recorded by the state. You are a completely free man, Terrence. You have zero claim to my estate, my agency, or my assets." I pulled out a second, thicker stack of legal papers. Second, I have the finalized custody orders for Malik and Tiana. Since you chose to skip your scheduled weekend visitation to fly to Miami, forcing me to document your deliberate parental abandonment on our court-monitored application, a judge granted me full legal and physical custody. You are now relegated to supervised visitation at my sole discretion. Terrence raised his hands, shaking his head side to side. Maya, stop, he whispered, pleading with me under his breath. Please stop doing this in front of my bosses. I ignored his begging and pulled out the third document, holding it high enough for Chloe to see. Third, I have a certified copy of the foreclosure and eviction notice for the downtown luxury high-rise apartment you leased last month. Because your personal credit cards are completely maxed out and you lack the liquid capital to pay the rent, the property management company initiated the eviction process yesterday. The locks will be changed on Monday morning. I suggest your real match starts packing her bags immediately. Chloe let out an embarrassed sob, covering her face with her hands. Her influencer friends were actively backing away from her, distancing themselves from the radioactive fallout of her fake luxury lifestyle. I saved the absolute best for last. I reached into the folder and pulled out a document stamped with a glaring red federal seal. The silence in the atrium was absolute. No one breathed or moved. 200 people watched as I delivered the final devastating blow. And finally, Terrence. I have the active felony fraud investigation paperwork initiated by the Federal Banking Commission. I declared, my voice ringing with cold justice. When you forged my signature on a cash-out refinance application, attempting to illegally extract $250,000 in equity from my home, you committed a severe federal crime. I confirmed the forgery with the Senior Fraud Division. They recorded your false statements during your bank interview on Tuesday. The federal agents are wrapping up their case right now. Terrence staggered backward, physically stumbling as his knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of a cocktail table to keep himself from collapsing onto the floor. His corporate colleagues were staring at him with absolute disgust. The regional director of his sales division, a man Terrence had spent months trying to impress, was already typing furiously on his phone, likely contacting their human resources department to initiate Terrence's immediate termination. Just as the sheer magnitude of the devastation settled over the room, a loud screeching voice broke the silence. "You vindictive, spiteful witch!" Jasmine yelled, shoving her way past a waiter and storming toward the center of the floor. My former sister-in-law was shaking with rage, her sequined dress catching the light as she pointed an aggressive finger at my face. "How dare you do this to my brother?" Jasmine screamed. "You are embarrassing our family. Terrence is a good man who made a mistake, and you are a bitter woman trying to ruin his life because you could not keep him happy. He has always been generous to everyone, including me. He is the king of this family, and you are nothing but a petty party planner." I looked at Jasmine and felt a slow, chilling smile touch my lips. She had willingly walked right into the crossfire. Behind her, Lucas was frantically shaking his head, desperately trying to signal her to shut her mouth. Lucas knew about the bank files. Lucas knew what was coming, but Jasmine was too blinded by her ridiculous suburban entitlement to read the room. I reached into the very back of the black folder and pulled out one final single sheet of paper. I held it delicately between my manicured fingers. "I am so glad you decided to speak up, Jasmine," I said, my voice radiating absolute lethal calm into the microphone. "Because I have one last receipt to share tonight, and it directly involves your beautiful remodeled kitchen." Jasmine froze, her finger dropping to her side. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice losing its aggressive edge. "Last year, Terrence gave you a $20,000 personal loan to renovate your kitchen," I explained, projecting my voice so every single guest could hear the sordid details of her suburban life. "You bragged to the family about how generous your wealthy brother was. You claimed he paid for your custom marble countertops out of his own deep pockets." I took a step closer, watching the sweat form on her forehead. "Except Terrence did not have $20,000 in his personal account, Jasmine. In order to play the wealthy benefactor for you, he secretly transferred that money out of Malik's college savings account." Your generous brother stole $20,000 from his own 12-year-old son's educational future to pay for your kitchen cabinets. The entire room erupted in a collective gasp of pure horror. Stealing from a child was the ultimate unforgivable sin. The corporate executives looked visibly nauseated. Chloe's friends stared at Jasmine with open revulsion. Jasmine stumbled backward, bumping into Lucas, her face completely drained of color. She looked at Terrence, silently begging him to deny it, but Terrence was staring at the floor, completely broken. "But do not worry, Jasmine," I continued, slicing through the heavy tension like a sharpened blade. "I have rectified the situation. My attorneys filed an emergency asset recovery motion. I legally forced Terrence to repay the stolen $20,000 directly back into my son's educational trust via maximum wage garnishments. Every time he receives a paycheck, if he still has a job after tonight, a massive percentage will be automatically deducted to pay back the money he stole for you." Jasmine covered her mouth, letting out a strangled, humiliating sob. She looked at the faces of the wealthy elites surrounding her, realizing that her social standing was completely, permanently obliterated. She was no longer the proud matriarch of a successful royal family. She was the greedy, entitled sister of a federal criminal who stole from his own child. I placed the stack of legal documents onto the nearest cocktail table next to Terrence's abandoned glass of scotch. I handed the microphone back to Marcus, smoothing the silk fabric of my emerald gown. I had systematically dismantled every single lie, every false narrative, and every illusion they had built to elevate themselves at my expense. "Enjoy your party, Terrence," I said, my voice quiet, meant only for him and the terrified people standing in his orbit. "You paid cash for the venue. You might as well stay until the lights come on." I turned on my heel, the emerald silk of my custom gown swirling elegantly around my legs, and began to walk away. But I only made it 3 steps before the sharp, aggressive sound of shattering crystal brought the massive room to a dead standstill once more. I glanced back over my shoulder, pausing my exit. Chloe had dropped her premium champagne flute. It smashed violently against the polished marble, sending a spray of expensive foam and jagged glass shards across the toes of Terrence's burgundy velvet shoes. The young influencer was staring at the man she had proudly called her high-value provider with a mixture of absolute horror and profound physical disgust. Terrence reached a shaking hand out toward her, his prior arrogance completely replaced by a pathetic, desperate panic. He opened his mouth to speak, to promise her he could fix the unfixable, but Chloe did not let him utter a single word. She took 3 rapid steps backward, physically recoiling from him, as if his sudden poverty was a highly contagious terminal disease. Her influencer friends, who had been capturing every second of this disaster on their phones, immediately circled around her, forming a protective designer shield. One of them actually shoved her camera directly into Terrence's face, capturing his total ruin for their millions of followers. Chloe did not scream or cry. She simply picked up the hem of her heavily beaded silver gown, turned around, and marched straight toward the heavy oak doors. She left him standing there in front of his corporate bosses, abandoned and humiliated, without a single backward glance. The real match had expired the exact second the stolen money dried up. Seeing his mistress abandon him, Terrence pivoted blindly, searching the room for a lifeline. His frantic eyes landed on his sister. Jasmine was still standing frozen near the cocktail table, her face streaked with ruined makeup, her mind clearly racing to calculate the catastrophic social and legal damage she had just absorbed. Terrence took a stumbling step toward her. "Jasmine," he croaked out, his voice weak and pleading. "Jasmine, you have to help me explain this to them." But before Jasmine could even process the request, her husband violently grabbed her arm. Lucas, the bank manager who knew exactly what the federal government did to people involved in interstate wire fraud, yanked his wife backward with terrifying force. "Do not say a single word to him," Lucas ordered, his voice loud enough for the surrounding executives to hear. "We have absolutely nothing to do with him or his finances." Jasmine stumbled in her heels but let her husband pull her away. She did not defend her brother. She did not offer him comfort. The fierce family loyalty they had constantly weaponized against me completely evaporated the moment federal prison became a tangible reality. Lucas practically dragged Jasmine through the crowd, pushing past the stunned waiters and bolting for the exit. They fled the venue like rats abandoning a sinking ship, leaving Terrence totally isolated in the center of the massive glowing atrium. The silence in the room shifted from shocked to suffocating. The regional sales director signaled to his team, and the corporate executives began quietly moving toward the coat check. No one wanted to be associated with a man actively under federal investigation. Terrence was entirely alone. His shoulders slumped, his chest heaved, and the reality of his total destruction finally broke through his thick skull. He looked at me standing near the edge of the stage. The anger was entirely gone. The arrogance was dead. He stumbled forward, closing the distance between us, his hands shaking uncontrollably. Tears spilled over his cheeks, ruining his perfectly groomed appearance. "Maya," he sobbed, reaching out to grab the sleeve of my dress. I stepped back quickly, keeping my silk gown far out of his desperate grasp. "Maya, please," he begged, his voice cracking as he fell to his knees on the marble floor right in front of the stage. "Please, you have to fix this. You have the money. You know the bank people. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I was confused. You are my wife, Maya. You have to save me." I looked down at the man kneeling in the spilled champagne and broken glass. I felt absolutely no pity. I felt no lingering attachment. I felt only the supreme clarity of a woman who had finally excised a massive tumor from her life. I looked at him with dead, indifferent eyes, letting the silence stretch out so he could feel the full weight of his consequences. "I am not your wife, Terrence," I said, my voice dropping to a calm, cold register that only he could hear. "I am just your co-parent." I leaned in slightly, delivering the final blow with surgical precision. "And according to the app, it is your weekend to take the kids to soccer practice. Do not be late." I turned my back on him for the final time. I did not run. I walked smoothly and deliberately through the parting crowd of stunned guests. My security team held the heavy oak doors open for me, and I stepped out into the cool evening air, leaving Terrence sobbing on the floor of the room he had paid $85,000 to rent. 6 months later, the intense tropical sun warmed my skin as I lounged on the pristine white sands of a private ultra-luxury resort in the Maldives. The crystal-clear turquoise water stretched out infinitely before me, perfectly matching the absolute peace in my soul. A gentle ocean breeze rustled the palm fronds overhead, carrying the joyful sounds of my children splashing in the gentle surf. Tiana was busy building an elaborate sandcastle near the shoreline, while Malik waded through the shallow water, pointing out colorful tropical fish. They were thriving, completely insulated from the toxic chaos that had once threatened to consume our peace. Without the constant dark cloud of their father's narcissism hovering over our household, they had blossomed into incredibly confident, secure children. They were happy, healthy, and profoundly loved. I picked up my tablet from the small teak table beside my lounge chair, sipping a chilled glass of fresh mango juice. The quarterly financial reports for Golden Horizon Holdings and my event planning agency were glowing brightly on the high-resolution screen. My business had exploded in revenue following the highly publicized incident at the Monarch. The elite social circles of the city thrive on absolute discretion and quiet power, and my flawless execution of that evening had cemented my reputation as a woman of untouchable influence. High net worth clients flocked to my agency knowing that I handled every single detail with lethal precision. My wealth had multiplied exponentially, providing the kind of generational security that Terrence could never even begin to comprehend, let alone touch. As for Terrence, his descent had been rapid, brutal, and absolute. The federal fraud investigation concluded with a stringent plea deal that kept him out of a lengthy prison sentence, but entirely destroyed his corporate career and his life. He was terminated immediately by his regional director and permanently blacklisted from the high-end sales industry. With a felony fraud conviction permanently attached to his record, he was forced to take a severely demoted mid-level administrative job at a local logistics company, earning a pathetic fraction of his former vice president's salary. His weekly wages were heavily garnished, paying back the stolen college funds, the massive remaining corporate debt from his Miami trip, and the strictly mandated child support. He was currently living in a tiny, cramped studio apartment on the dusty outskirts of the city, far away from the luxury high-rises and premium steakhouses he used to frequent. Chloe had blocked his number the very night of the party, instantly attaching herself to a new wealthy sponsor and scrubbing any mention of Terrence from her digital footprint. Jasmine and Lucas completely refused to speak to him loudly, blaming him for their sudden social ruin in the suburbs. He had absolutely nothing left but the crushing, agonizing weight of his own consequences. I locked the screen of my tablet and watched Malik and Tiana run along the shoreline, their genuine laughter carrying over the gentle crashing waves. For 10 long years I had allowed a mediocre man and his deeply entitled family to convince me I was meant to stay hidden in the background. I had subsidized their grand illusions and swallowed their blatant disrespect just to maintain a fragile, broken peace. I had paid off his debts, pressed his shirts, and protected his fragile ego while he boldly searched for a woman he considered his equal. But sitting here in absolute paradise, I realized the profound, magnificent truth of my journey. The sweetest revenge was not actively destroying him. It was not screaming or fighting or lowering myself to his toxic, chaotic level. The ultimate victory was simply stepping back, removing my protective hands from his life, and letting him destroy himself. I gave him the rope, and he enthusiastically tied his own knot. I had reclaimed my crown, my wealth, and my absolute freedom, and I would never let another person dim my brilliant light again. I smiled, taking a deep, calming breath of the fresh ocean air, completely and eternally free.